Ford is an earth-to-earth sustainable supply chain expert with TQM Works Consulting based in the US. He provides innovative solutions based on 40 years of operations experience. Ford has presented at over 400 industry events throughout the US, Canada, Japan, Nigeria, South Africa, Australia, Saudi Arabia, the Netherlands, and the United Arab Emirates. He has provided over 7,000 hours of classroom training. Mike Ford combines his technical expertise with personal skills to develop a unique outside-the-box approach to life's challenges. He is a charismatic and popular speaker who specializes in delivering training that is edutaining. Ladies and gentlemen, please prepare to be edutained by Mike Ford.
I was about to say, hey, Tanya, in 26 years of presenting, that's the first time I got the here's Ford that I request. But after listening to that, I was pretty impressed. Perhaps we have set the bar too high. So I am here to talk about the earth-to-earth supply chains. You can just call me Ford. It's not Mr. Ford, Professor Ford, or anything. Although my full name is Michael Ford, there are way too many Michaels in the United States, so just saying Ford helps clarify who we're talking to. I would like to start out by sharing why this topic is important to me. This is the view from the top of Whiteface Mountain, which is one of the high peaks of the Adirondacks. The Adirondack Park in upstate New York is the largest park in the United States. And this year I set a goal that I would climb all 46 peaks within a calendar year. There are people who try to climb all 46 in 10, 15, 20 years or a lifetime and don't do it. I'm up to 22 now. Now, please do not be deceived. At work, we have lots of dysfunctional metrics. Not all peaks are created equally. So you can assume maybe in January and February, I was doing some of the easier ones. So I'm actually a little bit behind pace when you consider the elevation and the total distance. But I love the outdoors. I am probably the antithesis of a couch potato. I do not own a television set. I haven't watched television at home since fall of 2005. I am active in running, biking, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, or just hanging out outdoors. So this is a very personal topic to me, and I hope to you as well. Because in the supply chain courses I teach, I say, what's the start of your supply chain? And they go, well, my supplier. And I go, well, don't they buy from somebody? Their supplier, and their supplier, and their supplier. And after 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, eventually someone will say, it's the planet Earth. Would you agree? For no matter what your business is, pharmaceuticals, automotive manufacturing, airport, transport, start of the supply chain, everything is either harvested or mined from the planet Earth. And downstream, what is the end of every supply chain? Also the planet Earth. Very good, miss. Please, these are some smarties here. I'm a capitalist. You're going to work, but I will pay you. My goal is no candy coming back on the plane to the U.S., all right? So I will make sure to hand that out. And when we think of it, instead of saying E2E is end-to-end, if we could please from this point forward call it earth-to-earth, it helps emphasize how important it is to engage in sustainability measures. And in fact, maybe we should say environment to environment. So I might update this because I've had some students who suggest, well, if our energy sources are either solar or wind, maybe it's not Earth, it's environment. So we'll see if this presentation looks different when I present it in Austin, Texas in September at the APEX International Conference. Yes, you are the beta or pilot test for this presentation. Because I know you have such demanding standards of quality, no defects will get passed on. This is a poka-yoke presentation. We'll identify the defects here take care of those. So we only have one planet Earth, so that's why sustainability is very important. And I cannot stress enough the value of saying how important this is to me. Before I dare be so arrogant and to presume that I am qualified to talk about Earth-to-Earth sustainable supply chains, I decided I need to have expertise in a minimum of 3 different areas, and I'm very interested if you will agree in this. I said first, I have to be a practitioner. I did a lean workshop Sunday, and I told that audience, you know, not only do I teach lean concepts, but I practice lean concepts in my personal life. And I think that's very consistent between lean and sustainability. So maybe I can give credit to great-great-great-great-grandpa Henry Ford. If you are familiar with the story of the original Ford Motor Company going back over 100 years ago, Henry Ford had a lot of lean and sustainable practices. Now, we didn't have the buzzword lean or the buzzword sustainability. And in fact, a lot of people just said, well, he was cheap, he was frugal. That's okay. If you're going to reuse or recycle stuff to help the bottom line, that's still fine. You're being more efficient in your use of resources. So I said, number one, in order to teach about sustainability or talk about it at a conference, I have to practice it in my personal life. The second thing, and the second and third thing might be different or something you might not have expected to hear. The second thing, I believe I have to have some level of expertise in engineering principles. I do have 3 engineering degrees and several engineering certifications. The reason this is important to me is because over the course of my lifetime, I've heard about all these fantastic proposals about the world of tomorrow, where the speaker seems to ignore the laws of physics. There are practical realities. You cannot treat natural laws like the laws of physics or the laws of chemistry as if they are a mere inconvenience, as if you can wish them away. So I have seen things that I say, this just is not going to work. There's a practical reality. All right, you can have your fantasy and talk about the wave of the future, what's going to happen. That will never become reality because of physical laws. The third item, having some level of expertise in economics. All right, that ties right into the engineering. All right, something is not going to be sustainable if it's not going to add value to the marketplace, if consumers are going to turn away from something. So I say, in order to speak on this topic, I should practice sustainability in my personal life and understand practical limitations of the laws of supply and demand and natural laws of chemistry and physics. Do you think that is a fair assessment on my part? And of course, I've attended a lot of conference sessions and heard people speak about sustainability who seem to have the passion, and it was important in their personal life, but the second and third items, I said, okay, this is a fantasy world. These are things that, in spite of best intentions, will not be implemented. And we do nobody on this earth a favor to suggest things that are not practical. So I thank you for agreeing with me on that. Oh, excuse me, I want to back up and point out, I update things frequently, so I updated this presentation this morning with pictures that I had taken yesterday. I did Table Mountain, and wow, that was exercise. Considering 6 weeks ago I was on a snowy peak, so I've noticed Cape Town. I checked the temperature in Cape Town yesterday, and Fahrenheit was 74. My hometown of Port Cray, New York, it reached a high of 64. So I concluded, winter in Cape Town is still warmer than summer in New York. So what really beat me was the temperature. All right, this is the agenda that we'll cover over the next half hour. And the first 5 items are the key topics. I want to talk about the concept of corporate social responsibility and define what that is, and particularly with reference to stakeholders. We'll talk about the concept of the triple bottom line, which perhaps some of you may be familiar with. We'll move on to a waste hierarchy describing the 5 R's, and then we'll talk about how we can convert from a linear supply chain to a circular supply chain. And the 5th major topic, this is the one that will include engineering concepts. I will talk about the need for our design concepts and considerations of sustainability to be valid throughout the entire earth-to-earth supply chain and throughout the entire product life cycle. And that means we include harvesting and mining, maybe of heavy metals, and the carbon footprint of that mining that a lot of people seem to conveniently ignore. Or maybe the sustainability. How much does it cost to sustain, repair, or maintain equipment? You can't ignore that. And I'll just give you a very brief example of this. I'm trusting we would all agree, because I think this will be a very simple comparison. If I were going to compare an electric vehicle, an EV, versus an internal combustion engine, that's an ICE. If I'm going to drive from Century City to the waterfront and back, absolutely an EV is more sustainable. It's not even close. What about driving to Jayborg a couple times a week? On one of my prior presentations when SOPIC's conference was in Sun City, I decided I really wanted to see South Africa, so I rented a car in Johannesburg and drove to Cape Town. And please, if you ever come to the US, don't spend a whole week in New York City and say you saw America. Rent a car and drive around any country. I almost ran out of gas because the spoiled American was used to an all-night 7-Eleven gas station every hour or so on the highway. I'll edit that one out before I do Austin, Texas. So I discovered, wow, there's not a 7-Eleven gas station every hour along the way. And even where there are, they're not 24 hours. I'm just wondering, in the 5 years, or 6 or 7 years since I made that drive, how many EV charging stations are there along N2? Even less? 2. And you better know where they are. And then if I extend this to the mining and harvesting of lithium and nickel and cadmium, it's not Tesla cars that are doing that mining. The bulldozers, the heavy equipment, and what about the disposal of the lithium battery and servicing over time? Now, I'm not going to say that an ICE wins. I'm just saying do a fair comparison. That's the engineer and the economist in me saying, let's do a fair comparison here. And we'll have a corporate social responsibility exercise at the end. I thought if we had time, maybe a personal responsibility exercise. That's the handout. Maybe that is something I will assign as homework. So I'll come back next year and see how you did on that. But just some food for thought, because I always say if it's a good presentation, you keep thinking about it after the end of the presentation. So let's go ahead. Who's a stakeholder? Well, I start out by thinking, what's a shareholder? Well, a shareholder is anyone who has a share in an organization. So a stake is anyone who has a stake in the organization, a vested interest. Well, it starts with the employees, all right? That's the most important thing. And you think about their families and how we provide a paycheck. And I and many other Americans have started rethinking the concept of outsourcing to low-cost labor countries. We said, well, maybe the widget costs less if I buy it from 8,000 miles away, but what about the total cost? What about the damage to the environment of shipping that across the ocean on a cargo ship and all of the necessary protective packaging? So maybe it would actually be more sustainable to buy from a supplier up the street. The item price might be higher, but the total cost, including sustainability, will be less. Shorter lead times, less need for safety stock, less need for accurate forecasts. or being able to develop partnerships, working together on continuous improvement projects. So a lot of America realized we didn't outsource parts, we outsourced jobs. The next item, our partners throughout the earth-to-earth supply chain, all right, they all have a vested interest. We say a supply chain would be just like a regular metal chain. It is only as strong as its weakest link. And if that weakest link breaks, the supply chain is broken. So it extends to all of our suppliers, and all of our downstream customers until ultimately the consumer, all of their families as well. And the community. So if you are an international firm like ExxonMobil, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, any of these firms, I mean, they have a global impact on potentially maybe 1 billion or more people. If you think about every place their products could be sourced, manufactured, distributed, or transported. So it somewhat becomes the world at large when we're a major multinational corporation. This last one, I'm guessing if anybody is involved in transportation, oil and gas, pharmaceutical, the medical field, you're very, 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 very familiar with the limitations imposed on government regulation. And of course, that ties a lot into sustainability. Opportunity for a piece of chocolate. This is going to be a two-part question. Just before you answer quickly, I'm going to ask if you believe government regulators are customers, and I'm going to follow that up with why. So you have to earn it. So do you believe regulators are customers? See, if I didn't add the second part, everybody would have got a piece of candy really quick. But if you answer a yes or no question, I want you to tell me why. Worst thing that can happen is you get a piece of candy out of this. Yes, sir. You say yes, and why? I was just looking over here if I'm able. I was thinking, can I cut over here? All right, the gentleman has said yes. Please repeat why.
Because the government benefits from the supply chain through its economy.
Because the government benefits. Okay, that's interesting. Do consumers benefit? I'm not giving you candy because I agree with you. I'm giving you candy for participation. The economist in me might dare suggest any government proposed regulation, instead of implementing it, why don't you just float it out to the marketplace and see if the brilliant people in the market sector implement it and say, this will give us more business and we will beat the competition, and they will be forced to adopt it. So that's a thought. We won't resolve this today without going outside and rolling around and fighting in the parking lot, but there are people who have suggested any proposed regulation, if it was such a brilliant idea, why would private sector companies not voluntarily do it? And you're more than welcome to take the position that politicians are smarter than the Bill Gates of the world. If that's your opinion, God bless. I just, my good friends in Washington, D.C. are free to quit their jobs, open their own tech companies, open their own restaurant chains, open their own airlines, and show us how much smarter they are. I think everybody in the room recognizes that's not going to happen. But we'll just say that's a what if. At the very least, we know we do have to follow the law. And my strong recommendation is that every country starts on their own before regulation is introduced. I'm pretty good at forecasting. I fully expect that sustainability requirements will become more demanding. That is certainly a trend I expect to continue. My recommendation, do not wait until it is imposed on you with the threat of a fine or going to prison. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, if you wait till the last second, you'll be behind the curve. and it will be very, very expensive to implement. If you go above and beyond whatever the law requires, you will be viewed as visionary and a leader within your sector. And then you will already be at a level above the law. So once the law is imposed, you're already meeting or exceeding those standards. So even after my anti-regulation comment, I'm telling you I think it's a smart thing to do because it will cost less to do it well in advance of any proposed legislation. Any questions or comments on this slide? And I will frequently ask questions or comments on this slide. I know sometimes you have questions on something else. Be patient. Maybe a following slide will address that, or we'll save that for the end. So just for efficiency, I will tend to ask any questions or comments on the slide in front of us. All right, the next item, the triple bottom line, is known as the intersection between our concern for people, that is the social concern, our concern for profit, that is the economic concern, and our concern for the planet, that is the environmental concern. And it's interesting how I have met people who think these are conflicts. I do not believe that to be the case. If you have a 95% yield, which means 5% is getting scrapped out, you increase that to 99% or even ultimately 100, I believe you just help the planet and you just help the bottom line. Similarly, with people, if you're being better to the environment, you're not dumping wastewater in the local river, I think that helps people. And consumers are looking to do business with good corporate citizens. We look for organic foods in the supermarket aisle, and I've noticed when I walk through the organic food aisle, things cost more than the other aisle. That is an indication that it adds value. People are willing to pay more. Also, prospective employees, people will be attracted to your firm. So when you do the right thing, you will gain both lifelong loyal customers and lifelong loyal employees. And I believe in paying the best wages and providing the best benefits, because it is much less expensive to keep an employee than to have to train a new one if that employee moves on to another firm. So I realize the graphic doesn't illustrate it here, but I believe there is a huge intersection between being good for the bottom line, good to people, and good for the planet, subject to the engineering and economic realities that I discussed a couple slides ago. We cannot ignore those. Any questions or comments on the triple bottom line? I'm just going to have to throw the candy around in a minute. I shouldn't throw it, though, because I don't want to hit anybody in the eye, and because I hate filling out incident reports. But in 26 years of presenting, only one person has ever gone to the hospital. And you say, man, that's horrible. No, man, I'm at a Lean Six Sigma level of quality when you think of all the audience members I've had. So it was just a one-off event. All right, this is what's known as the 5 R's of the waste hierarchy. And I wish to illustrate that the first one applies to the forward supply chain. Reduce the use of any resources in the forward supply chain, whether that's machine time, labor, cash, space, raw material, shipping containers, energy, packaging, any materials, any cash, anything in the forward supply chain, reduce it, subject to you're still able to provide the right quantity, right quality of the right item to the right customer at the right time in the right place. Let me give you an example of maybe sustainability taking a step too far. I remember years ago in the United States when we used to have all these paper grocery bags, and over time they got thinner and thinner, and somebody says, well, we're being better for the environment. Well, it then became commonplace for the checkout person to have to double bag everything. And I go, okay, how did you help save trees if you made these bags so thin they either rip and the groceries spill all over the place, or you have to double bag them? That ties back to the practical realities that I had mentioned before. So, assuming you can continue to provide the product, goods or services at the right quality level, et cetera, then reduce the use of any resources in the forward supply chain. After that, the next 4 refer to the reverse supply chain. And I know in common parlance, we tend to interchange the terms reuse and recycle. So, piece of candy if somebody wishes to distinguish or contrast between those two terms. Yes, sir.
Yes, so reuse, you'll use packaging. For example, I'll take packaging for an example. From a supplier to the end user, it supplies something in the packaging. The same packaging is returned back to the initial manufacturer or supplier and is reused for a cycle of times. Recycling would be put it in a cardboard box, it goes to the end user, and then you recycle that cardboard and repurpose it to something else.
That's worth Hershey's chocolate, and thank you for that. So if anybody didn't hear the beginning, reuse means you're really reusing it as the same condition. Recycle, it's getting broken down. So I can think on Wednesday nights in the humble village of Port Crane, New York, that is the night I set out my garbage and recyclables. So whenever I print a page, I use a document. When I'm done with it, I send it through the printer again and print on the back side, or I use it for notes or maybe for a grocery list. So I use both sides of the sheet of paper. That's reuse. Wednesday night, I set it on the curb, it goes back, and somewhere it's broken down, and maybe it becomes a new sheet of paper or cardboard box or something. So reuse, we're really saying pretty much is the same condition. Recycle, it's broken down and can become a different product. So again, go in order. First reduce, then reuse, then recycle. The next one is if we can recover any energy by putting waste through an incinerator, or sometimes you can recover some small parts or a portion of the product. So recover any materials or small parts, burn off, convert the rest to energy. The last option, responsible disposal in a landfill. Responsible disposal in a landfill. That's very important. So please go in order here. Reduce moving forward, then the other 4 refer to the reverse supply chain. Questions or comments? The gentleman has just asked, I thought the idea was to eliminate. I have seen some publications or heard some presentations or books or websites that have added avoid to the top. This is what's known as unnecessarily complicating. That's just reduced to 0. I want to keep this easy, especially people pursuing the APIC certification exams. Keep it simple, right? Keep it simple, all right? That's what's important. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, so the traditional supply chain was linear, and at each stage or phase along the way, we've got some loss, some waste, but then ultimately, at the end, we say then historically, you know, most of it just gets waste, and very little was reused or recycled. The concept of a circular supply chain says most of it will be recycled and very little of the product will ultimately become disposed in a landfill. And I'd like to give you some interesting examples where what was formerly waste products became what we call byproducts or co-products. I'm guessing you're very familiar with the concept of buffalo chicken wings, which started at the Anchor Bar on Main Street in Buffalo, New York, about 60 or 65 years ago. Chicken wings used to be something that we threw out in the United States, or it was something only poor people ate. There's a section of our supermarkets where you will see things like oxtail, pig's knuckles, cow tongue. You know, most people don't buy these, but they say, hey, if somebody will buy them, and they're usually like 30 cents a pound or something, you know, they're just, hey, I can sell them. Chicken wings used to be there. Most people did not eat chicken wings till the bartender at the Anchor Bar on Main Street in Buffalo, New York, fried some up, set them on the bar with some hot sauce. Next thing you know, they're now the most expensive part of the chicken, all right? So it went from being a scrap product to being a premium product. Same thing happened with potato skins. Most restaurants would skin off a potato skin and throw it out, and somebody goes, hey, wait a minute. If we throw some sour cream and bacon bits and cheese on this, we can charge $10 for that. It's something that went from scrap to a premium product. One more example. My father was a truck driver, and one time he picked up a load of sawdust. Do we know what sawdust is from a lumber mill? The sawdust that's on the floor? Picked up a load of sawdust from a lumber mill and took it to a Procter & Gamble facility. And my dad says, what? Procter & Gamble, what are you doing? And now this was a Procter & Gamble facility in Mahoopany, Pennsylvania, that made Pampers. Pampers are a disposable diaper. Sawdust is a very highly absorbent material. So this was scrap from one company, became a raw material for another. So I'd like for us to look for those opportunities to say, maybe it's scrap to us, but somewhere else in the supply chain or in another industry, it can be something that's the raw material. All right, the last major topic here. Your engineers, or researchers, scientists, at the start, whenever they think of a new product, I want them to simultaneously design a product and design the entire earth-to-earth forward supply chain and the earth-to-earth reverse supply chain with considerations of the entire product life cycle, serviceability, maintenance. Some of us know this as concurrent engineering, or we call it the DFXs. Design for procurement, design for manufacture and assembly, design for warehousing, design for transport. I do a full day sustainable engineering design workshop for Binghamton University every year. And the engineers are shocked to hear this stuff. They go, well, no, that's purchasing's problem. That's warehousing's problem. That's logistics problem. And I go, you wonder why the rest of the people want to beat the hell out of you. You know, you design something, you should think about the entire supply chain, forward and reverse. It's engineers not thinking about that stuff that lead us to being stuck with a sole source supplier. So I want cross-functional participation. New design teams, I want HR involved. Do our people have the skills to build it? I want the production floor involved. Do we have the current machinery and equipment? I want procurement involved. Can we source this? Particularly, can we locally source the raw materials and components? I want logistics, transportation, and transport involved. Can we support this in terms of transport and warehousing? And of course, can we service the part, or how will we reuse, recycle? And not just cross-functional internally, let's get our customers and suppliers. The entire supply chain should be involved. That will reduce cost and help you be more sustainable and more competitive. And this is very important in terms of being competitive. This is not supply chain. This is not a world where it is Coke and Pepsi. It's not Coke and Pepsi. It's Coke's supply chain versus Pepsi's supply chain. In the United States, Walmart beat Sears and Kmart. It's more accurate for me to say Walmart's supply chain beat Sears' supply chain. Why is Amazon winning? It's not Amazon beating Walmart, it's Amazon's supply chain beating Walmart's supply chain. So let's get all of the functional areas of our company involved and our upstream suppliers and downstream customers involved to design this, considering serviceability, repair, and maintenance. Anybody know what company that is? It's McDonald's. I should throw out candy to everybody. At the end, come up, please, because I'm not taking any candy back to the United States, all right? So let's go through this exercise. These are 4 examples of McDonald's engaging in social responsibility. And after I describe the scenario, I would like you to tell me, was it proactive or reactive? And the second part of the question is, do you consider it to be strategic? And I've done this exercise long enough to know opinions might vary. I'm not going to declare that my suggestion has to be perfect and correct. Most of an audience tends to agree with it when I explain it. So let me start with the first example. Back in the 1970s and earlier, McDonald's coffee stirrers were in the shape of a spoon at the end. You couldn't drink the coffee with it. It was, you know, it's just an aesthetic thing. It was a little spoon. It wasn't even useful, but that's how they were designed. You couldn't spoon out the coffee with it, but you could spoon out powder cocaine. Police agencies all across the country, when they were doing drug busts, were finding McDonald's coffee stirrers. And in neighborhoods where there's lots of drug, crime, and criminal activity, you would see drug addicts walking into a McDonald's, walk over, grabbing a handful of coffee stirrers, and walking out. Due to public pressure from anti-drug communities, politicians, and attorney generals and police agencies, they redesigned it. Now, you wouldn't have even noticed this unless you snorted cocaine. It was a very minor aesthetic. They just flattened out the spoon. Again, if you didn't snort cocaine, you probably did not even notice it. Because, of course, the spoon's in your coffee. You don't know what the end looks like. Is this proactive or reactive? It's reactive. The pressure came from the outside. Do you consider this to be strategic? Holy moly. Fight it out. Why? Why would you think it's strategic?
Because it's responding to something that made them look bad if they didn't do it.
You're responding to something that made them look bad if you didn't do it.
It's the voice of the customer.
It's the voice of the customer. Miss? Yeah, I think we agreed it's reactive. The question is, do we feel it's strategic or not? Miss, hear you. I am handing out lots of candy now, so please share with people next to you. One more person. Who says it's not strategic?
Yeah, it's social responsibility. It's part of your social responsibility.
Take one and hand the rest down. I'm going to say I decided that this was reactive but not strategic. As I said, unless you snorted cocaine, you did not even notice this. I doubt it changed the price of the coffee stirrers. It really had no effect on the supply chain whatsoever. Unless you snorted cocaine, I don't think you would have thought this was strategic. Turned away those non-paying customers who were stealing the coffee stirrers. In 1974, and I might go over a minute or two, but lunch is after us. Does that? See, there's a plus and minus of being before lunch. Plus being, maybe I can go over a minute. Minus being, you're going to walk out anyway. But I hope you'll at least stay for the completion of this exercise. 1974, McDonald's opened their first Ronald McDonald's House. This is lodging they provide for families of people whose children are suffering from terminal illnesses. So, for example, maybe somebody who lives near me has to take their child to a hospital in New York City and stay there for a weekend. They're saying, oh, we will put you up in a hotel or a Ronald McDonald House. We'll pay for the family's lodging. Do you believe that this is proactive or reactive? Proactive, yes. Nobody forced them to do it. They decided to go out and do it. Do you think it's strategic or not? Yeah, it's strategic because McDonald's is known as family-friendly fast food. They have a playpen or playground area in their restaurants with swings or slides and things you can climb on. They're also the first fast food restaurant to have a kids' meal, which they call the Happy Meal, including a toy. So they have always branded themselves as family-friendly fast food. So it is strategic. Thank you. I could not find a year for this one, but they currently have a food waste hierarchy program. They've decided to do this to help give food to people who may be homeless or at shelters, or donate to hunger programs in different cities throughout the United States. And they say this way we can make sure we use food as opposed to it just being wasted. Is this proactive or reactive? It's proactive. Is it strategic or not? Yeah, I mean, they're food. They're a restaurant. It is the primary supply chain material. Final example here. In 1990, they announced no more styrofoam packaging. There was lots of pressure from environmentalists and activist groups. The government was threatening regulation to say we're not going to allow styrofoam packaging anymore. Everybody was very upset because styrofoam takes about 10,000 years to decompose in a landfill. I can't say that with certainty, and I don't think I'll live that long, but a long, long time. So they switched over to paper-based packaging. Do you believe this is reactive or proactive? It was reactive. It was from a result of outside pressure. Is it strategic or not? I don't know if we were as enthusiastic on that one, but it is strategic because packaging is a major part of supply chain activity, plus this was consumer packaging. That's where the big M is going on. So this was strategic. So I thank you very much on that exercise. I just want to stress how I am sustainable. I buy very few takeout meals. I do not buy processed food that's pre-made. I buy it from the raw material stage. I am trying to be close in terms of farm to table, as close as possible. And I am using the concept of total productive maintenance on my body. This is the only machine that God gave me. And it's also the only machine on the planet, the more stress you add to it, it performs better. Did my first marathon last year at the age of 61. So take care of yourselves, engage in sustainable practices. If anyone wants to hang out, I'm not going to run away. If anybody wants to hang out and have other questions or comments, you can hang out for a minute. But the rest of you, you're free to run away to lunch. Thank you very much.